Well, good afternoon and welcome to Your American Heritage. My name is Ed Bondarenka and I am, of course,
a white Christian cisgender male.
And producing the show is the guy that answers the phones and warns me commercials are coming, and he tells me,
"Hey Ed, your microphone's not on."
And that's Derek Stone, the Swiss Army knife of radio and the host of
Stone Cold Sports Truth.
Sundays at noon 30, right after my friend Sean Todd hosts The Intersection at noon. The Intersection is
not your normal fluffy Christian show.
So listen to both those shows before Dr. Dave Janda's Operation Freedom comes on at 2. And on Saturday, listen to all the shows, Abolitionist Roundtable, Trigger Talk, and of course this show. And then stay tuned after this for my friend's show, Speaking of Art, Ed Hoffman. Yeah, you got to listen to that. Calms you down after all the politics. And Your American Heritage is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now Google Music. And you can subscribe, boost the signal, be a Paul Revere, get the word out. And you can find the Spotify at the top of whamradio.com. You'll see the links to the podcasts, and sure enough, you can get us there and you can give it to your neighbors and you can link people in. And it's important that you do because there's a war going on for control of America and you. And it involves spiritual warfare. It's a struggle to enslave mankind. It started before you and me got here. So how do we fight back? We get organized, preferably a good church. We go to court. We educate our neighbors. We support those who take the battle to the enemy. And we arm ourselves intellectually, physically, and spiritually. Intellectually, we learn the facts, share them with others. Physically, well, learn to defend yourself. Get a gun. Learn to use it. Learn to defend the nation that way. And spiritually, once again, find a good church and join with others in prayer for our nation, like this. Father, please lead us and guide us as we seek to protect this nation. Please help us protect our heritage and the rights that you have given us from evil conspirators, thieves, traitors, and tyrants. And please bring these enemies of good and sound morals to a place of repentance. If they will not repent, please remove them from our presence. Amen. Well, our guest this hour is Michael Finch. Michael Finch is the president of the David Horowitz Freedom Center and has a long career in conservative and liberty-focused nonprofit organizations. He's a native of Illinois and an Air Force veteran. I'm going to ask him about that in a little bit. He has a deep faith in and love for the greatness and beauty of America, and he's a frequent speaker and a published author and poet whose articles have appeared in Front Page Magazine, Front Page Mag, American Thinker, and American Greatness. And he has published 2 poetry books, Finding Home and Wanderings in Place. He's also the author of the book, A Time to Stand, a collection of a number of essays he's done, which also has some of his poetry in it. I've just read the book, and I'm impressed, and I thought it'd be good to have him on the show. Fortunately, he agreed. So, hi, Michael. May I call you Mike?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor. I'm very grateful. And thank you for having other members of the Front Page and David Horowitz Freedom Center team on your show. We're all very thankful for what you do.
No problem. Just last weekend, we had Daniel Greenfield on again. And so one thing, why don't you tell us about yourself? I gave a brief bio, but, once again, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Illinois, obviously. But then how'd you get to be where you are, schooling, et cetera?
Well, yeah, I grew up and born in Peoria, but grew up outside of Chicago and stayed in Chicago all the way through. Went to school at DePaul University in Chicago. And before that, I joined right out of high school, though I did serve for 4 years in the Air Force. That was a long time ago. Wasn't ready for college, but then went to college and moved around, lived in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years, came back to Chicago. I worked for the Heartland Institute, a think tank and a libertarian think tank in Chicago. Then eventually in the mid to late 90s, I moved out to California, worked for Larry Arnn at the Claremont Institute. Larry Arnn, of course, now runs Hillsdale College in your state of Michigan, but he was at the Claremont Institute when I was there. And then about 23 years ago, I got hired by David Horowitz to work at the Freedom Center. And I had been with David. David, of course, sadly just passed away earlier this year, but I had worked for David for 23 years and I've been the president of the center now for some years. But Daniel Greenfield has replaced David as the new CEO of the Freedom Center. So I love liberty. I've been very blessed to be able to say that this is a job. I mean, for over 35 years now, I've been working in the nonprofit sector, doing what I feel is, it's my passion and trying to save this country and restore this country. So I've had a really lucky life to be able to call this a career.
Oh, that's blessed. You know, it's funny you should mention that because last week I was talking to Daniel Greenfield and I said, well, I hear you're the new CEO. And he downplayed it and actually made me think my information was wrong. He said, well, we're a team effort. He was very, very self-effacing. And then when I read your bio and I said, well, CEO, the president. So now I'm a little bit more clear on that. And can I ask what you did in the Air Force, being an Air Force veteran myself?
Yeah, I was a meteorologist. I was a weather observer. So I didn't go all the way through. If I'd stayed in and made a career, I would have been a forecaster. But I was actually a weather observer stationed in Germany for a couple of years when we still have a few bases there. We had many bases. I joined in 1979, so that was a long time ago. I joined at 17, but yeah, I was in weather, and then I was stationed for a couple of years up in Wisconsin at Volk Field, which is an Army airfield. And then I was ready to go to school. So I loved my 4 years. It was a great experience. And Ronald Reagan it was the first time I got to vote for president. Was 1980. 18 years old, I got to vote for Ronald Reagan. I was already stationed in Germany, and it was a great experience. I would say if anyone is not ready to go to college, join the service. It's a great way to start your life.
Now, I wouldn't have said that to anybody under the Biden regime. But no, absolutely.
No.
Absolutely.
Well, I joined when Jimmy Carter was president, but that was briefly. Then we had the election, and the entire 4 years I was in, pretty much Ronald Reagan was president. That was a very different than Jimmy Carter. I agree with you 100%. It's okay to join now, at least for the next couple of years, and hopefully under President Vance or President whoever, anyone for President Gavin Newsom. California had been my home for a long time, and let's hope we don't send Gavin Newsom to the White House.
Amen. I signed up under Richard Nixon, and I was in Wiesbaden, Germany.
What branch were you in?
Well, I was in the Air Force, and
great. Okay.
Yeah, I made sergeant, and I was in microwave radio because that's the wave of the future, you know. But
well, thank you for your service.
Same to you. But it's a good preparation for life. It's a good place to grow up before you go on to do other things. And I've never had the kind of responsibility in my civilian life that I had as a 20-year-old in the Air Force. And it's just scary stuff. I've been a plant manager.
It's a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Better than spending time in your parents' basement in your 20s, right?
Amen. Amen. Well, I got to tell you, I read your book last night. I just went through the whole thing. I just read the whole thing. I couldn't stop. And well, I thought I should anyhow for the interview. But boy, and Daniel Greenfield gave a nice intro to it. But he says about you, he says, some men fight for the things that they hate, while others fight for what they love. Patriotism, before it became degraded into just another meaningless noise in the political gabble, was a testament of love. He goes on to say, when you read this and walk with Michael Finch through America as he knows it, you too will become one of his patriots, the fellow countryman of a man who loves every inch of this country. When reading Finch's deeply felt musings and calls to action, the lines that come to mind are from a song that might have been our anthem and that was once simply known as America. I love thy rocks and rills, thy woods and templed hills, my heart with rapture thrills like that above. And that's poetic, and you have a lot of poetic descriptions of America in here, but it's not all poetry. A lot of it's just good political essay, but it shows the heart of somebody who's been around, who loves America. You've been out in the boonies, you've been out, in the outdoors. You've come to love the outdoors. It's like I think you say somewhere in here about you don't love America because you've been, holed up in Washington, D.C., and the political structure. You love America for what America is. You want to expand on that a little?
It's an incredible country, Ed, as you well know, and I'm sure you've traveled a lot. And I haven't been to every state, but I've been to a lot of states and lived all across the country. It is a beautiful country, and the landscape defines who we are. I mean, that really is the aspirations of America, sea to shining sea. I mean, there's so much to that. It's an incredible story. And to be able to drive, I've taken so many driving trips in America, and I wish every American could get in their car and drive across the country and go see as many corners of this great country and meet as many people as you can. You fall in love with it. I mean, how do you not have a love affair with America, the people and the land? And that's who we are. I mean, and I think we lose touch of that. I mean, you hear people in California, New York talk about flyover country, and look, I mean, New York City. Well, I don't know how great it is anymore. It's the financial capital of the world, I suppose. California is a complete mess, but it is extraordinary beauty in California on the West Coast. So. It is. I mean, I do have a love affair with this country, and every little corner of it, from the deserts all the way. I love the Midwest. I've written about Wisconsin. Of course, I grew up in Illinois, but the Northeast, the South. I mean, there really is. There's so much to experience, and that's who we are. The people and the landscape are who we are.
I would say actually the landscape made us to some degree. People settled in certain areas. Well, I remember my dad. He grew up in California, PA. Like, well, why'd they name it California? Well, they were heading west, but they stopped and they wrote home and said, "We made it to California."
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. But there's things that stop people, from traveling further. They like where they were. They settled down, or maybe there were natural obstructions. I had a guest on a few months ago from Tennessee, and he says, basically his area of Tennessee got passed over by the rest of the country because nobody stopped there. It was such a difficult place. They just kept heading west. They didn't stop there.
Yeah, my family had immigrated to, the Northeast. Gosh, that was, right after the Mayflower, and we ended up as far west as Iowa. Not everyone makes it. I made it all the way out to California, but you could spend your entire life or generations on the coast of Maine, and that's America. So I'm not saying everyone's got to migrate everywhere. It's great if you're able, because of the wonders of modern travel, to be able to get in your car and drive across the country. If you're able to do that and see so much, but you're right, the landscape and you look at one of the portions of my book, I talk about the great landscape artists of the 19th century, the Hudson River School. They started on the banks of the Hudson, and you look at Albert Bierstadt and others painted Yosemite and the Rocky Mountains all the way to to Oregon and California. And they had a kind of a mission to paint I know the Native Americans had been here, but the history is what it is. It was a blank canvas waiting to be written and painted. America is extraordinary, and the artists, the poets, Walt Whitman, and these great artists who painted the landscape in such brilliance, is a great piece of American history and American culture. And if you could just get a book or go online and look at some of the paintings these artists did, it's extraordinary, and you realize the beauty of America is just. You're right that the landscape defines us. I think more so than other countries. I don't know, but it certainly defines us in a very unique way.
I'm looking at the introduction to your section called "Beauty" by our friend Mark Tapson, and that you're right. And it's funny as you mentioned some of these artists who depict the country and some of the poets and all. I have a friend who has a show right on after this, Ed Hoffman. It does Speaking of Art, and he's described some of this, and I'm thinking, hey, I have some exposure to that because I've listened to his show and then looked up some of this stuff. And you're absolutely right. I'm looking for. Well, you mentioned some of the people in here that, in particular, some of the artists, but you have of beauty and art. What is in the quest for beauty? For what is art? What is it but the search for God and to feel his touch upon us? What but love can soften the hardness and heal what ails us? A warm wind that soothes our body and restores our souls from the chill of the night, coldless black. A rising sun of rays upon our face in the midst of the toils and pain that we ache to leave in the passing night. I mean, I didn't do that justice. I should have had you read it. But
well, thank you. No, that's thank you for reading that. I try to express that as best as I can. I mean, others have expressed it much better. Of course, I'm I'm more of an amateur poet. I've have published 2 books, but
Excuse me, did you get paid?
Art is beauty.
Did,
I mean, the purpose. Go ahead, Ed.
did you get paid?
Uh, Only marginally. No, I'm not much of
Okay.
a. That's why I'm still working very hard in the nonprofits, or
Okay.
trying to
If you
run
get
the operations of the Freedom Center. I love poetry more as kind of a hobby, but it is my way of expressing things. And what better way to express kind of the beauty of America other than through poetry, but and art. But art is beauty. The purpose of art is to show beauty and try to reach the divine if in any way you can. I mean, he's not an American, but Johann Sebastian Bach said every piece of music he wrote was the purpose of pleasing God. So whether when you build the ancient cathedrals in Europe, they were rose so high because they wanted to rise to the heavens. And I think great art, with at least in some way, is our way of reaching the divine, which we fail. The left would like to think that we can create this utopia and heaven on earth here, but the left hates beauty. I mentioned that, and I haven't coined all these phrases. The left hates beauty. They attack the beauty of art. And modern art, I think, often it looks the other way. Putting a cross in a vat of urine and calling that art is disgusting. I mean, I that's not art, and it certainly isn't beauty. But we strive for, great art strives for something different. And we've had some incredible artists in this country that have reached to that level.
You've spoken of the art of the cathedrals, the beauty of the cathedrals reaching towards heaven, and yet, unfortunately, most of them are very low attended these days. But in comparison to that, I look at you're from Chicago. I look at the Obama Presidential Library. I actually had to look up who the architects and the design team of that were. I just want to see what other ugliness did they put on our planet. And when I did, I saw they did some museum work in Chicago, a couple different museum, a wing, the modern wing in Chicago, and it looks fine. And I'm just wondering, how did that atrocity get built?
Well, I don't, it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day because I'm obviously, there are some modern art that uses some of the kind of, classical lines in it. And I won't say it's all ugly, but if you drive by the University of Chicago and its beautiful Gothic architecture, it's one of the most beautiful campuses in the country, if not the world. It is absolutely gorgeous. And only a few miles away, if you drive by the Illinois Institute of Technology, which might be a great school, I don't know, on 35th near the Dan Ryan, is a concrete slab. It looks like something out of a 1970s Planet of the Apes movie. I mean, it's not aesthetic. And I'm bringing up one other example. Arthur Brown is one of the great artists. He was an architect. He designed City Hall in San Francisco. He designed the Federal Triangle in Washington. Washington, D.C. has some incredibly beautiful buildings built along classical lines. And he also built City Hall in Pasadena, which is one of the most beautiful buildings in the country. And if you go there on a weekend, it's thronged with people who want pictures. They have, photo opportunities. They bring out professional photographers. If you go to the City Hall in like Van Nuys, California, which is just a steel concrete slab, nobody's there, right? No one wants their picture taken next to it. So it's not like I'm saying that I'm the only person. You have to be like something to be able to say this is beautiful. This is a beautiful building. The capital of Wisconsin and Madison is one of the prettiest capitol buildings in the country. I mean, that is beautiful architecture, and we have so much of it in this country. And then you have modern architecture, kind of a brutalist form, which is just, it's not appealing. And I don't get it. I don't get the Obama library, if that ever actually gets completed. I've seen the designs, but that's a disaster, as Donald Trump would say. It's ugly. I mean, I don't know what they're thinking. I mean, the Ronald Reagan Library wasn't built in 1910, obviously. And it's a beautiful building. So, you can still build something in this modern age and have some beauty attached to it and not make it such an ugly sight. But
well, I think art is reflected. It's a reflection of the soul of the artist, and maybe sometimes not just the artist, but the patron of the artist. But why these guys, this design team in Chicago, decided to? I mean, I really wanted to know, was that a reflection of Obama's soul? Because it sure looks like it. It looks like it's corrupt and ugly, and
it is. And what's ironic, it's on the same site where the Columbian Exposition was, where they had these incredible, I think the Museum of Science and Industry is one of the permanent buildings. Many of the buildings that were designed for the Columbian Exposition were only, temporarily. They were built just for the fair. The Museum of Science and Industry was a permanent building. That was part of that fair. And everything was built. If you look at the pictures, it looks like something out of classical Athens or Alexandria, right? I mean, it's just incredibly beautiful. The White City. It was just incredibly beautiful. To turn that on its head, and Obama decides to build his museum in this ugly form right on the site of where all this beautiful architecture had been. So I don't know. Maybe it's a reflection. I don't know what it's a reflection of. Maybe that's his maybe that's his soul. I don't know. I'm sorry to say that, but I hope that never gets. It may take another fit. It's kind of like the bullet train out here in California, which will probably never be built. Maybe that library will never actually be completed. I don't know, but it's a shame. It's really a shame and a stink. Because Chicago's got some incredible architecture, really beautiful architecture. So it's a shame that we're going to build that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even think they have any track laid for that train in California, like $11 billion left.
Billions.
Yeah, exactly. Just sitting there racking up bills. And boy, I'll tell you, we've been talking about art and we've been talking about poetry. And I'm afraid that my friend Ed Hoffman's going to think I'm, walking all over his turf, But similar to when I end up talking about guns and firearms, I think the previous show's host, Dick Kupke's going to think I'm treading on his turf, but it's just the way it goes sometimes. This has been, but we are going to get into some more after the break. We're going to get into some more themes, some more political and current themes other than just art. But going back once more, we have like about a minute and a half left. This whole concept of postmodernism, is like there's no God in postmodernism. It's a rejection of God. It's a rejection of God in our heart and our souls. And I think that gets reflected in a lot of these buildings that are built. It's, once again, the ugliness of the soul. It might not even just be the ugliness of the soul. It's some of the buildings that you see built are to project an aura of authoritarianism and a reference to there being no authority, but whoever's in that building. I don't know how to put that. Sort of like Mussolini, like Hitler did, in his buildings when he built the Reich buildings,
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know how much time we have before the break. It's ironic.
30 seconds.
Okay, we can maybe pick this up after the break. But Jefferson, when he talked about the designs of Washington D.C., he wanted to lean upon Greek and Roman architecture. He wanted classical architecture, but he wanted to be different than England. He didn't want to model Washington D.C. to look like London. Greek and Roman architecture was pre-Christian, right? So but they were built in order to, maybe their gods, or to build it for something higher than what they were. So that was the purpose of Greek and Roman architecture. So the modern architecture doesn't appeal to anything. There's absolutely no design, no beauty, no deity, nothing. It is just, but they reject beauty. The Greeks and Romans certainly did not reject beauty in building the great buildings of classical Greece and Athens and Rome.
Okay, we're going to have to take that up after the break. Okay. Folks, come on back after the break. We'll be talking to Michael Finch some more. Come on back.
Thank you.
This is your American heritage. This is where faith, freedom, and truth still matter. This is your American heritage.
Well, welcome back to Your American Heritage. And we're talking to Michael Finch of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. And like we said, he's the president of the Freedom Center. And I You need to avail yourself. Go, Google David Horowitz Freedom Center and find out some of the resources there, and you'll be impressed. There's a lot of good articles there, a lot of links. They also have the what is the site? I can't remember. It's the terrorist.
Oh, discoverthenetworks.org.
Thank you.
That's
Discoverthenetworks.org.
our encyclopedia of the left on the web.
Yeah. So you wanted to talk some more about what we were talking about, modern architecture.
Yeah, it's interesting. In Donald Trump's first term, right at the end of his first term, he enacted an executive order where he said all new federal buildings he wanted to have built along classical lines, which mirrors what Thomas Jefferson wanted to do again when Washington, D.C. was being planned. The left immediately attacked him as saying this is fascist architecture, that he's a dictator, because he wanted buildings to look like the Jefferson Memorial or the U.S. Capitol, which is a classical design. But that's what the founders wanted. That's what Jefferson wanted. So, but when Donald Trump did that, he gets attacked as a fascist. And then you had mentioned, Hitler's architecture. Hitler wanted to rebuild Berlin and call it Germania, and he wanted the architecture to be classical, but more of brutalist. He didn't want any of the kind of adornment that the Greeks and Romans used. So it was a different kind of classical. But that's irrelevant in the sense that they attacked Trump because, if Hitler liked classical architecture, then he was obviously a Nazi, then Trump must be a Nazi, which doesn't make any sense. Classical architecture, people have been admiring the Parthenon and the Roman Colosseum and the Roman Forum for 2,000 years. So the idea that just because you like classical architecture means that you're a fascist, but again, they accuse that of Trump for everything. But again, there is beautiful architecture and some of the most beautiful buildings in this country, and it was all designed. Jefferson said, when he wrote John Adams, he said, we need to build a new architecture for America as a new country that defines us. And he wanted it to be extraordinary and beautiful, right? So again, he leaned on the classical designs because that's the prettiest architecture in the world that's probably ever existed, right? If you could rebuild Constantinople or Carthage or Alexandria or rebuild Athens and Rome to what it once was, I think we'd all be in awe. We're all in awe anyway. If you ever just even look at pictures of these buildings, it's incredible. And many of the buildings across this country were built along those lines. So, hats off to Donald Trump. By the way, Joe Biden rescinded that executive order. One of his first orders, when he first got into the White House, he wiped away Donald Trump's executive order and they called it Make American Buildings Beautiful. They mocked Donald Trump. But God bless him for doing that. I hope he continues to try to push that in the second term. But architecture is important. It kind of unites us. We can't all have a White House in our backyard. But to have the people's house look like the White House, the Capitol, U.S. Capitol, and all the most state capitals were built during this American Renaissance of architecture. And Sacramento, Madison, Wisconsin, East Lansing, right? Or Lansing. I mean, the Capitol buildings, most of the Capitol buildings in this country were built during that period, and they are beautiful, beautiful buildings.
Well, they keep calling Trump a fascist, and it reminds me.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
It's the worst fascist I've ever run into, right? The worst king. If he, we won't go down that track. That's been done before. But I want to get off onto some of the other thoughts you have in this book. And interestingly enough, and speaking of Donald Trump, he's been blowing up some people that have been trying to get to this country to do damage to us, and has been facing a lot of grief for that. And I've been hearing it, frankly, from a lot of libertarians, which I think it's just because they want the drugs in the country because they like drugs. But you mentioned here in your may I read this? You're not going to get me for copyright infringement, right?
That's okay. Please do.
In 1818, the borderlands of Florida, then part of the Spanish Empire, were ruled by gangs, cutthroats, and thieves. It was a lawless region. Do you want to go on and talk about that?
Well, Yeah, Spain didn't have any authority of, their power was, in Mexico City, but, Florida was kind of the, on the fringes, on the, like a far outpost. So they really, other than a small detachment in St. Augustine, they really didn't have any control over Florida. And Florida had become, so you had a lot of miscreants and thieves and cutthroats. They've always existed. That's not a modern phenomenon. And they would run down to Florida because it was Spanish. It was not part of the United States. It was part of Spain. It wasn't, Mexico wasn't independent at that time. So, and they would come across the border and steal cattle. They would raid villages. And there was a lot of, obviously, in southern Alabama, southern Georgia, you had a lot of farmers and settlements. So they would raid these settlements and steal the cattle, do whatever, just all cause mayhem. And America was getting sick of it. I mean, they were being invaded by these kind of cutthroats and thieves. And the President Monroe told Andrew Jackson, he was a general, he wasn't president at that time, obviously, but he said, you need to go down there and just see what you can do. And he didn't tell him to go into Spanish Florida, but Andrew Jackson took kind of the authority and loosely, and he went into Spanish Florida and he cleaned it up. I mean, this is the version of Trump possibly, or some president saying, look, we're sick of the cartels. We're sick of what's coming across the border from Mexico. We're going to send the U.S. military down there because if Mexico can't fix it, then we are going to fix it. Well, Spain wasn't even capable of fixing it, even if they wanted to. So Andrew Jackson took care of business himself. And the president was like, he said, oh, we can't do that. But then privately, he was thankful that Andrew Jackson went down there to take care of things. So, sometimes we have to protect our border. We have to preserve our border. We're all pro-immigrant. I get that. But we have to know who's coming across. We have to limit immigration. We are certainly opposed to illegal immigration. It is illegal. And we need to control that. And Donald Trump, again, being called a fascist because he wants to have authoritarian, a dictator because he wants to actually have a border, and he will do whatever's necessary, I think, to be able to secure that border. So if he needs to send the military down there, just like sending the National Guard to Portland or Chicago or some of these other cities that have completely lost control, the residents are very happy if the National Guard comes in there to make their streets safe. But yeah, Donald Trump thankfully he's back and he wants to protect the border, and he will do. And there's precedent in American history. We're a sovereign nation. If we don't have a border, we don't have a nation. That's common sense, and I think most Americans agree with that. Donald Trump certainly understands that. And but I'd like to draw on the historical example just to show, look, I mean, America's been in this situation before, and sometimes you just have to take care of business.
You mentioned Mexico, and I just all of a sudden occurred to me, and I hate when that happens, like, why didn't I think of that earlier? The Pancho Villa and Blackjack John Pershing. I mean, we had Pancho Villa from Mexico who was actually raiding across the border. And, so we sent the army under, John Pershing, Blackjack John Pershing. We sent cavalry units, and they went down looking for into Mexico, looking for Pancho Villa to take out that threat. Now, whether that was extra legal or not, well, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to protect yourself and your citizens, like you were saying, right?
Well, especially on our border. I mean, I think, we all kind of want to pull back from sending American troops to every corner of the globe, trying to nation build in the Middle East or all the other things that we've done. We got to pull back, I think, from that. I think most Americans would agree with that. Nation building, trying to build a democratic republic in Afghanistan is a non-starter, right? So we've made some mistakes. The border is different. I mean, what happens, 10 miles south of St. Angelo, Texas, is very different, right? So we do have to take, and we've always done that. I mean, the Monroe Doctrine, I mean, it's been misused. I mean, we've made some mistakes, but what happens in the hemisphere, and particularly what happens south of the border and north of the border, which has been pretty quiet for a couple hundred years, but there are some, issues there too, I suppose. But what happens south of the border affects us directly. This isn't a question of, do we have the rights to go down there? Well, if they can't control it, then we are going to control it to protect American citizens and protect our sovereignty. So, you could say, we shouldn't be interventionists. Well, yeah, maybe not, on the other side of the world, we don't need to intervene in everything. I agree with that completely, but we have to intervene when our own sovereignty is being threatened. So I'm all for whatever measures are necessary in order to fix it. And it's just not being fixed. I mean, the fentanyl that comes in from China goes through the cartels. I mean, this goes on and on and on. I mean, we've been fighting this. Ronald Reagan, God bless him, he had tried to secure the border, but he made a bad deal with the Democrats, and that just opened the border even more. And we've been battling this issue for really, most of our lifetimes. I mean, this has been a problem for decades, and we finally have a president who says, "I'm going to try to protect the sovereignty of the United States, by whatever means." And I hope that means by whatever means.
Well, and then thus the title of your book, A Time to Stand. And you have a section in your book that comes from an article that you wrote in 2024 called It's Time to Stand. And once again, with your permission. And the poet in you comes out in your prose. That's really interesting. Will freedom fall, given to lust of power and man's insatiable quest to conquer and control? Our betters, our elites, this ravenous lot, conspire to betray us, our heritage and land, our lives and freedom, all for riches, power, the conquest of our souls. And man, that's pretty good. But then you say, but hope kindles, the tree of revolt burns, the flags of our fathers fly, bled down to Creekside in the meadows wake, and winds from westerly flow. A free land once more, a last hope and gasp. So you talk on about recovering America. Would you like to speak to that so I don't have to?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, look, I mean, we've sold, particularly in the heartland, we've sold our manufacturing base, or not even sold it. We gave it to China and other countries, but mostly China. And we've completely destroyed, middle class wages have not been rising. I mean, we've completely gutted our manufacturing base, and how we can recover from that, I don't know. I know Donald Trump means well. He's going to do the best he can, but we've lost so much, Ed, and we sold it. I mean, for nothing. To gain what? To think that the Chinese would become a free democracy. And I'm not saying shouldn't engage with China at all. We should trade as best as we can, fair trade. I used to be much more libertarian on trade. This in the 1980s. I believed in. I originally thought NAFTA. Well, this NAFTA is a great deal. It'll be good for both sides. It wasn't. It was great for Mexico. China's taken advantage of NAFTA, but it destroyed our manufacturing base. So that's what I mean when I say we sold ourselves. And we need to recover that. And I think Americans understand that. So, it's not lost, it's not gone, but we have so much to recover. Thankfully, we have someone in the White House who understands that. Hopefully, he'll be followed by someone who can follow American first foreign policy and economic policy, American nationalism, America first. And our politicians on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, I think for most of our lifetime, completely abandoned that. And I guess they figured America could just survive and thrive no matter what we did or what we sold and what we gave away. But it's tragic on what happened. I mean, the America that you and I grew up in when we were younger was a very different America than what we have right now. And it's I think in many ways much weaker. And we have, it does affect the soul of America, and we have to recover that.
Well, you're speaking to somebody, and a large part of our audience is from Michigan, and we know what's happened to our manufacturing here. I work in manufacturing. I program machines and robots and the like, and have designed equipment. And then you find out that, well, this plant's closing and that plant's closing. Your market's shrinking, and even now in what I do, we're finding that, we're not building tooling here in Michigan. We're importing it from Mexico because it's cheaper. And it's funny that the company I'm aware of, they had the equipment delivered to Michigan, and in transit, half of it was destroyed because they didn't latch it down right. And it was so much cost.
Look, we can make the greatest things. We have all the entrepreneurship, all the patents. I mean, we design everything. America still has so much strength, and we can build anything. We can make anything as well as anyone else in the world. But when you allow another country to say, you'll impose a 50% tariff on selling American automobiles, but we'll allow your vehicles to come in with no tariffs or a very minor tariff. That's, in China, it's takes so many countries have taken advantage of this by flooding our market. You can't compete that way. So I'm all for, what President Trump's trying to do with the tariffs. I wish he would offset it with reducing income taxes. I don't necessarily like the tariffs piled on top an already burdensome tax system. Get rid of the IRS, eliminate the income tax. The government survived on tariffs for about 120 years before the income tax. So we can tinker with those things, but and the quixotic 100% tariffs today, no tariffs tomorrow. I mean, we're all going to get whiplash from that to a certain degree, but I understand what he's doing, and I've gotten to the point now where I don't even like to question the motives, because he always has a plan for everything. So I could sit here and say, what is he doing? And then a few months later, that's what he was doing. He was making a deal. He's making a better deal. He cares about America, and he wants to bring back that man. I think if that's the one thing he could do, other than keeping us out of some major war, is he wants to bring the work. He would take care of the working class, the middle class, and bring that manufacturing back home to America. And I think if he can accomplish that, then I think that would make him, his legacy would be secured. He's doing his best, and I certainly, on my part, fully support that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just amazing the speed at which he's doing things. It's it makes my mind spin. It makes me question what I'm watching. You know what I mean? And in some regards, it's so out of the normal. I wonder, is this a good thing? But he only has a certain time frame. He only has this 4 years to actually, not impose his vision, but to bring forth his vision and get us to buy into it and actually do it. And hopefully his legacy will be carried on by, like you said, some people say DeSantis, but Vance or Rubio or whoever it is. It looks like, man, I never thought I'd be rah-rah Rubio. And all of a sudden, like, who is this guy? And so...
Well, it's kind of, he got kind of trained at the master's knee for a couple of years. It's a different Marco Rubio. I mean, I like J.D. Vance. He would probably be my first choice. But look, I mean, if you're talking Marco Rubio or Gavin Newsom or your governor, I guess Michigan and California are afflicted with horrible governors, but Whitmer or Marco Rubio, I'll take Marco Rubio. I think he's learned a lot in the last couple of years, and I've a lot of respect for him. But J.D. Vance is, I think, terrific. He certainly understands, the issues of the American working class. And isn't it interesting that the Republicans have become the party of the working man? I mean, it's quite a turnaround. And Donald Trump has politically changed everything. He's completely changed. Talk about landscape. He's completely changed the political landscape. I don't know what the Democrat Party is the party of, PhDs and
furries and transies,
which is why I even question, can they win next year? I do worry about the midterms, if just speaking politically, but because the off term, the midterms always kind of go bad for the party in power. So I do worry about if we lose that, if the Republicans lose the House, they're going to try to impeach Donald Trump on day one. That's almost inevitable. They did it twice before, so there was a lot to worry there, but. The whole movement has shifted. African Americans, Hispanic Americans have much more come because they understand that Donald Trump is looking after the interests of the common man. And it sounds like I'm talking, doing a kind of a speech for writing a speech for FDR, right? I mean, that's, but the Republican Party has changed. We still believe in a lot of the core beliefs, but we look at, Donald Trump saw this decades ago. He saw what was happening to the heartland and of the country, the middle of the country, the manufacturing base all over, and he wants to redress that. And thank God for that.
In the few minutes that we have left, there was something I wanted to talk to Daniel Greenfield about last week, and we ran out of time. I'm really concerned about the rise of what I see as anti-Semitism in conservative circles. And there's a clip from Glenn Beck I heard last week where somebody at some convention he was speaking to stood up and was talking about AIPAC and challenging him that, America first, not Israel first. It's not like we're making Israel first. But this guy, man, on Facebook, he said, and this guy is a conservative, and we were friends on Facebook. He says, Jews hate Jesus and his followers. Why does a Christian nation let itself be enslaved by kikes? And that's what they are. They are European Jews, and they are not Middle Eastern Jews. They're all bad, but still. And I mean, whoa, where is this stuff coming from, and what can we do about it? It's hate.
Yeah, I don't mind talking about it at all. I think it's frightening. I mean, anti-Semitism is a cancer. It's been part of our society, for part of our civilization and life for a couple thousand years. Obviously, America's been pretty much immune to it. There's always been some prejudice and discrimination going back in our history against Jews, but not the persecution that obviously at the level of Europe and other parts of the world. So Americans have been immune to that. And primarily the anti-Semitism currently is coming from the far left and Islam, right? I mean, radical Islam. Robert Spencer could talk about that for hours. So that is I think the worst cases of anti-Semitism are coming from those sides. But I'm very worried I do believe anti-Semitism is a cancer, and once it infects the host, it's very difficult to get rid of. And we see that in signs on the right. I don't think it's incredibly prevalent. I don't think it's to the point where, it's taking over the movement, but it's increasing. And those are the signs, the idea that, we are America first. AIPAC doesn't bother. AIPAC is there to lobby on behalf of Israel and try to do what's best for Israel. Well, there's a lot of lobbying groups. I don't know why they get picked on, why they get set apart. There are lobby groups for almost every country in the world. You don't think China has a lobby in Washington, D.C.? A lot of countries have lobbies, and they have a right to lobby. They're protecting whatever their interests. There's lobbies for everything, but somehow AIPAC gets singled out as again, the Jewish control of this and that and everything. And that kind of talk eventually, and you see it with, we were one of the groups that brought Candace Owens kind of in the public years ago. We had her at the Restoration Weekend, and she became this rising star. She worked with Ben Shapiro. She worked with Charlie Kirk. And she has just gone off the rails. I mean, to say what Israel's doing in Gaza is genocide. There is obviously civilians are being killed. It's horrible. We don't want to see women and children. I mean, nobody wants that. It is not genocide. Israel is going to every means possible to limit civilian casualties, much more, frankly, than we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, but that's, I understand that's war. But to call that genocide, and it's not even creeping anymore. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. It's just we got like 30 seconds left. And
okay.
You're absolutely right.
It's a problem, Ed. And it's a problem. I hate to see it on our side. I hate to see anti-Semitism rising in the conservative movement. It will divide. I'm a huge fan of Israel. Israel is an ally. It's the only friend that we have, and that really the only democracy in that neck of the woods. It's a dangerous part of the world. Israel's threatened every day, and we need to support Israel as best as we can. And frankly, that is in America's interest. So America first means being there for our friends or helping our friends, and Israel is a friend.
Amen. Well, folks, thanks for joining us this segment. We've been talking to Michael Finch, and he's the author of A Time to Stand. It just came out. We've been discussing it to some degree and some other issues. You can find him at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. Thanks for joining us, and come on back for the next episode of Your American Heritage. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Thank you.